Welcome to The Practical Intuitive, where host Robyn Fritz explores mind, body, and spirit for the real world. Robyn is an intuitive, spiritual consultant and past life regression specialist based in Seattle, Washington. As the Practical Intuitive, she explores life on our conscious, evolving planet, our Mother. It's all here, from how the world really works to intuition, the human-animal bond, mediumship, clearing space with space cooperating, and spirituality. It's Robyn Fritz, the Practical Intuitive, helping you master body, mind, and spirit for the real world. No ifs, ands, buts, or BS ever.
Welcome to the Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robyn Fritz, and it's Monday, December 19th, 2022. My cat is sitting on a desk watching snowflakes fall here at the beach in Seattle. And I'm going, oh, come on, winter, really? And it reminds me that life goes on no matter what is happening. And it made me think that today I wanted to talk about the afterlife and soul purpose and grief, because I see so much grief among the living and the dead. And that's how I ended up, partly how I ended up becoming a medium, one of the many things I do as a professional intuitive. But when I think about it, at the end of my life, whenever that is, I want people to know what the afterlife is really like, what it really is, what it really means for our souls, what it means for the grieving here and alive and in the afterlife. Because we've been haunted throughout centuries about what really happens when we die, and I think it's wrong. And I think once we know what the afterlife is really like, we go, oh my gosh, it all makes sense now, because it does. So I'm going to tell stories too, share some stories with you, so you not only relate to what I talk about, but you'll realize that you have your own insights on not just intuition and how you use intuition in your life, but what your life means to you now, what your soul purpose is, and how to relate with your deceased loved ones, human or animal, and what they're doing in the afterlife, and let your intuition inform you about that. And as I said, when I restarted my show in October this year, 2022, it was because I had been asked by our Mother, our conscious evolving planet, to be an ambassador to humans, if you will, to help us understand the world is and the universe is really bigger than we think. But that means that we are all ambassadors to each other, to the planet, to the universe, and that we all need to be thinking of life in larger terms than our culture tells us, and that there's more going on in the world and the universe than we know, and that we're a vital part of it, and that as equals with all life on the world, we're not above or below anything. And that is important for our understanding of the afterlife. Ironically, we're going to talk about some of the stories about the afterlife, but I want to get you connected with my crystal partner, Fallon, the citrine Lemurian quartz. Fallon is currently in the shape of a crystal ball. The citrine Lemurian is a pale yellow cast and beautiful planes within the crystal itself. But this connecting with Fallon during this hour is really going to help you boost your intuition and put you in a space where you can hear what I say and filter it through your own experiences. And it will boost how you relate to yourself and to the world around you. So take a deep breath and imagine the gold light that is Fallon going straight to your heart, and with each beat of your heart flooding your body with healthy energy. Just imagine it going to your head, down your shoulders, your arms, your hands, your torso, your legs, right down to your toes, and just clearing out the blocks, especially this time of year, weather issues, family issues, all trying to come to the end of really another extraordinary year of both pandemic suffering and real enlightenment on the part of a lot of people. So as I said in all my other shows, I don't have all the answers. I don't even have all the questions, but I know where to start. And that's with our role as equals with all life in the world, of looking at the world as it really is, from the place of what I call planetary connection, a name I gave to a way of life that the planet itself introduced me to, where everything is alive, has consciousness, has a job to do, a soul, a choice about doing that job, and opinions, right? And this reality carries us right through to the afterlife. So the first thing I want you to know about the afterlife is that when I was growing up, I didn't believe in the afterlife. I was born and raised Catholic, and the afterlife was just something that didn't make sense to me, and I was busy living my life, and like, who cares? Who cares what happens after you die? You're dead, you're gone, period. So it's ironic that I somehow became a medium, even though I started experiencing people I loved dying when I was only 9. So a big point for you to think about as you reflect on the afterlife is, what belief system did you grow up with, and did you buy into it or not, and why? Because I didn't believe the afterlife was real, and in fact, I was right. Okay, the afterlife does not exist, at least not in the way that our religious culture tells us it does. And that's the important point that I want you to take away today. You could say I'm anti-religion, and in many ways I am, but I am pro-love, pro-connection, pro-collaboration, and certainly have a great deal of reverence for our planet and for all life on it, regardless of what it is. I will have to say that I think about things like spiders and think I love all life, but some of it needs to be on a different planet for me. So, hey, I'm not perfect, but I do know that the afterlife, as religion tells us, it's not real. It doesn't exist. And I learned this from my dad. My dad, Ray, died actually on June 30th, 1994. I adored him, and I figured, well, that's it, over. It never occurred to me to talk to the dead or even to think about an afterlife or what they might be doing. But my dad, being my dad, took things into his own hands and showed up to talk to me about 6, 7, 8 years later. I'm not quite sure when that was. And didn't talk to me directly, because clearly he couldn't get through, but he talked to someone I knew who called me and said, hey, I've been sitting here with this person in the afterlife trying to talk to me, and finally realized it's your dad. And so that began a series of conversations with my dad, and a series of conversations you might have with your beloved dead, whether they're human or animals. Like, how are you? What are you doing? What are you up to? Well, what my dad wanted was, he, at however many years it was after he died, was going through his life review with his spiritual team, which is what we all do at some point. We die. We go to this place I call the gray zone, which is an in-between place, not purgatory, not whatever these other people say, but it's simply a place where we slough off the denser energies connected to our bodies, and then get to decide if we're going to the afterlife or we're going to stay in that place, right? In other words, going to the afterlife is a choice. And my dad made his right away, and he came back, and he'd been going through his life review, and he wanted to apologize to me for not being a dad that I needed, for not treating me as an equal, for making me less than because I was female. And he said, if you ever got a chance to be my dad again, that would be different. By that time, I'd remembered many lifetimes with my dad where we'd gone through that same dynamic: oppressive older man, oppressive father, rebellious daughter, as well as lifetimes where we were both men and raising families together. So when you connect with your deceased loved ones, as I'm going to give you some hints on at the end of the show, some tips that I give to all my mediumship clients, find out what they're up to and what they have to say, and what, did you have previous lifetimes together, and what issues did you have, and did you resolve them, and what does that mean to you now, right? Because the afterlife isn't the end product. It isn't the end place. It isn't where we die and everything disappears. So I said the afterlife, most of us think about, does not exist, but something else certainly does. And as I said, by the end of my life, I hope that more and more people understand what the afterlife is really like, because it affects our lives now. It's all about soul purpose. It's about love. It's about how we view ourselves in the world. And it's a continuum. It's not the end point. So how did that happen? Well, if you knew me well, or even vaguely from my show, you'd know that I can be kind of cynical at times. But I think maybe there was a time when people who were religiously minded tapped into the afterlife, or, people that they had known who had passed. But I don't think so, because if they had, how could they have created this heaven or hell perspective of the afterlife? I think they did it to control us. And culture is a great thing. Culture gives us stop signs in grocery stores and electricity, hopefully even through this week in Seattle, through major cold and much snow coming. Will we have power? But why? Why would they tell us that, we're going to sin? If we sin, we go to hell, and we can only go to heaven if we follow their rules. Because that's how they control us, right? But does it teach you about love? Does it teach you about love for yourself, about love for life around you? Does it teach you respect for all life, whether it's your animals, your home, your car, the people around you? Look at the world around us. Are we really respecting each other right now? So we think of the afterlife as a place of eternal punishment and joy, or punishment, and maybe eternal joy if we're really good. But I think it's really cruel that it teaches us that we're going to be punished for something, or that we have something to make up for. And one of the things my dad did, besides apologize for not treating me as well as he felt he should have, and he promised that he would do better, eventually he came back, and I was able to talk with him on my own. And we had a lot of conversations. And one of them was that he asked me to be a medium. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. And it wasn't because I don't respect mediums. It was because there were a lot of people out there doing mediumship, and it didn't look very interesting to me. I mean, it was like people getting proof from details about their dead beloved's lives. And so because they had proof of what their birthday was, or what their favorite color was, or all of these kinds, it was basically a guessing game, show and tell. And I wasn't interested in that. It didn't seem to me to be advancing healing, or resolution of grief, which is healing, or love itself. And my dad said to me, but I can go find them and bring them back and help you talk with them. And he explained to me that after he died and he was in the gray zone where everybody goes to slough off the denser energies, he could see the living and the dead reaching for each other. He could see energy lines between them. So think about it. If you've lost loved ones, human, animal, whatever, and you're grieving them, that's an energy line reaching out for them to the afterlife. As they're reaching back for you, in really, in many ways, if they successfully moved on to the afterlife, they can see more than we can, right? They can see us where we can't necessarily see them. And my dad, seeing that, could see the huge grief between people, and he thought that he could help heal grief by going and finding those people so that my clients and I could have a real conversation with it. Well, that made sense to me. If I could help people have a real conversation with their dead, then that would help both sides heal their grief and move on. But there was the other thing that my dad wanted me to look at, and that's bringing me to the subject of love, is he wanted me to help the dead that I ended up calling the stuck dead. Those are the dead who are in the gray zone, the place where we all go after we die, and I call it the gray zone because whenever I see it, it's kind of foggy, gray colored. They haven't made the choice to go to the afterlife, and you have to make a choice to go. You have to choose to go, and they haven't, because they wake up dead and it isn't what religion told them to expect. So they think they're in hell or about to go to hell. And if that doesn't make you angry or make you grieve, I don't know what will. I was horrified to see that, and then even more horrified at my dad's explanation. Well, often people are very confused about how they died and don't really know they're dead, but most of the time they're stuck because they haven't known how to love themselves, alive or dead. After the break, I will talk some more about that, and then we'll talk about soul purpose and grief. Hang on, we'll be right back.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
This segment of The Practical Intuitive is brought to you by Andrea Bovey, licensed insurance agent at boveyinsurance.com. Andrea specializes in affordable health insurance. Yes, affordable health insurance exists. It's called a defined benefit plan, and it's a budget concept. That means you'll be able to see any doctor, access outpatient services, receive covered preventative services such as mammograms and colonoscopies, enjoy unlimited free virtual doctor visits, and be covered for urgent care, ER, and hospital visits. There's more. During a free consultation, insurance agent Andrea Bovey can help you decide if you should add critical illness or accident coverage, so all your risks are covered when something serious occurs. All this while still delivering savings. Yes, the premiums can be much lower than those in marketplace plans. Ready to check it out? Go to boveyinsurance.com to book a free consultation with insurance agent Andrea Bovey. Andrea is based in Arizona, but she works by phone and webinar so she can help you wherever you are. Andrea works with her clients to find the best healthcare products at the best prices. Ready to learn more? Contact Andrea Bovey at boveyinsurance.com. That's BOVEY insurance.com.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for
summer break because she may not be having lunch again until September?
or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Practical Intuitive Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robyn, Fritz, and today we're talking about the afterlife, about soul purpose and grief. So I told you I didn't believe in the afterlife until my dad showed up some years after he died and wanted to talk. And then he kept showing up and kept talking. And, well, it's kind of hard to not believe in the afterlife when you start talking to dead people, right? But the afterlife he was showing me was substantially different than what I'd heard of before, which is partly why I believe in it, because I see it, right? And so you're saying, well, okay, Robyn, you see it, I don't. And I'm like, well, but you don't really have to. When you think about souls and you think about love, you don't have to believe what I say, although actually nobody pays me to talk with you about the stuck dead or to help the stuck dead. And that's really one of the things that is central to our conversation today. So I found my dad was concerned about the stuck dead. These are the people who have died and have not made the choice to go to the afterlife. A lot of them, I know after talking with many of them, they don't know where they are. They're not sure they're dead. They said, it doesn't look like the afterlife. And I'm like, what is it supposed to look like? And it's supposed to look like this weird vision of heaven or hell that our religious culture has told us about. And that's Christian tradition, but there are also Asian traditions and other traditions, and none of them are true. All I can say is I know they're not true because of what I see. And what you can know from applying your intuition to what you're hearing here today. So the more I worked with the stuck dead, the more I'm like, what's going on here? And the biggest problem they have isn't their religion, which is a problem for sure. The biggest problem they have is they don't love themselves. They didn't learn to love themselves while they were alive. And so when they're dead and they wake up in this strange place that they were not prepared to see or experience, and they have like total confusion, loving themselves is even harder because they doubt. And I've had so many of them tell me all of that. And then I say, but I said, what if I told you heaven and hell don't exist? That what the afterlife is really about is a continuation of your soul, which is you right now. Your consciousness continues, you remember. And the connections you want to have with your dead family, those are going to be easier once you're in the afterlife because you're not in this in-between state where you're not moving on. So here's the thing about the in-between place, what I call the gray zone. It's a stopping point. Your eternal soul doesn't go anywhere if it doesn't go beyond that stopping point. So it gets stuck, right? And I have met, not personally, but seen hundreds of thousands, millions of the dead that friends and I have helped move to the afterlife. And they all had the same problem. They weren't ready to go yet. They hadn't sloughed off those energies. They weren't brave enough to take that next step. And when I say what happens is that your soul continues to move on, there's no punishment. There's learning about what choices you made in your life and what you might do differently next time and new choices about what to do. They're all immediately ready to go, and they go and their souls then move on. So, I got curious about that because when I work with individual clients or when I help a bunch of the stuck dead move on at once, and that's a whole process for another time, I wondered, I could see my dad and his fellow way station managers, and I call them way stations for dead things on the other side because I have a peculiar sense of humor and I want to lighten up the conversation about the afterlife. So I see these people, see my dad, and you go through a doorway and you're at my dad's way station. It's a place where the dead who go immediately after they get to the real afterlife, the one where their souls continue to move on and to continue to grow and have experiences. These are the people that are waiting for them to help them. And there's a whole system in the afterlife of helping the dead, including dead buildings and so on. And so they get attracted to a particular color of doorway, and that's the doorway they go through. But I got curious because it was like I was working a lot with, Christians, because I'm working a lot with American and European dead. Of course, there's huge numbers that are not Christian at this point, which is, in my opinion, good, but not all religions are really good because they don't understand the afterlife. At any rate, an Asian way station manager showed up at one point, and he started talking with me and my friend that we partnered up together to help the dead move on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here's my opportunity to talk to someone from a different culture, Asian culture. And I asked him how long he'd been a way station manager, and he said, before the Great Wall. And I'm like, you mean the Wall of China? Like, wow, you've been doing this a long time. And he goes, yes. And he said it's very frustrating because of people who die within Asian cultural traditions believe they have to go down and then up and so on to the afterlife. And I'm like, oh. And he goes, yeah, and they're very angry. They're very angry that they weren't given an accurate picture of the afterlife, and they're so angry they can't move. And he goes, it's really hard to get them to a place where they can rest, which is with him or with another way station manager in a different place, so they can rest up and look at, the mistakes and the triumphs of their lives and move on. So that his job then was to go to different way stations and gather people from Asian culture who were interested in being in a similar environment that understood them. And that's how he managed his work over centuries, literally centuries. And it's like, wow. Like, let's tell people what the afterlife is really like. And what do you think that would mean to them? And we're back to the idea of soul purpose and souls. So what's the afterlife really all about? Well, it's about the eternal journey of your soul. Yeah, like when I didn't believe in the afterlife, I thought, well, you're born and then you die and whatever, what matters is what happens right here. Well, it does matter for this particular lifetime, what happens here, right? But our souls are on an eternal journey to learn to love, really. And I didn't understand that. And I learned that from my dad, who convinced me to help the stuck dead to move to the afterlife. But my dad, being my dad, had an ulterior motive, because he knew what I came to know was that I hadn't learned to love myself. And if you mention the word love to me, I tense up like, yeah, I don't get it, right? But the reality is I did not love myself. And that's where the problem comes in with the afterlife. If we don't love ourselves, through all our mistakes, through body issues, through things that happen to us, if we don't learn to just accept and love ourselves, then we're not going to love ourselves when we wake up dead, and it's going to be harder to keep moving. And it's lack of self-esteem. It's a whole bunch of things that get in the way of loving ourselves. For women, and I will say as a woman, for women, it's culture that tells us we're not good enough and have never been throughout the entire history of the human race. And that's another reason why I don't follow any religion. I look at all life as being equal, and it doesn't matter what body you're in or what sex that you've chosen to be in that lifetime. What matters is what you do in that lifetime. And I have clients come to me and they want to know what their purpose is. Like, what do I come here to do? I don't like my job. I'm bored. Well, okay, so let's go through the threads there. The threads there are basically soul purpose and then how we make a living, right? So we all have our work to do in the world. That's why we chose the bodies that we chose. I learned a lot from my animal family over the last 25, 30 years of living with different animals and realized, here's what happens in the afterlife. We rest up at a way station like my dad's. And again, let me just tell you quickly, way stations are in different places. So my dad's is in a high mountain meadow. But we've talked with people who are in way stations in cities and small towns. I mean, basically, the afterlife seems to work an awful lot like our planet does. I mean, they grow food, they do all kinds of things. And I'm like, okay, like what? I can't explain everything. I just tell you what I see. And some of the things my dad and I talk about and that the dead and I talk about. It's just so much different than us. It's like, wow, it's like sci-fi fantasy happening all at once. But when the dead rest up at a way station, they go to review their lives and they look at what worked and what didn't. What did they set out to do and how did they do it? So we have maybe these big ambitions to do something when we take on a body, but what happens is reality. So we have this idea that this is what we're going to do, and then we're born, and as I say, we're born, fun happens, crap happens, and we die. So we don't always get to do these things that we planned to do when we came into our bodies, but we still, like the physical things that we plan to do, like save the world or invent a cure for cancer or not get killed walking across the road, all of those kinds of things, right? So my animals chose animal bodies, and these are souls that I have known as humans in my lifetime. In fact, the soul that keeps coming back as a dog in my lifetime, I first knew in this lifetime as a human. Yeah, so get over your preconceptions. Souls get to choose the bodies that they think are going to work for them in that lifetime. And some of my animals have chosen these amazing jobs that I didn't know actually existed. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't know dragons were actually here, or that you could be an ambassador to dragons, or I didn't know this or that. And it's like, wow, how can I help you fulfill your choice in this lifetime? And it's like you provide room for them to live, right? And we're back to soul purpose. So my kids chose, and it's really kind of sobering for humans because we think we're the apex of civilization and we're not. Choosing to be human is a very complicated endeavor, and it's very humbling because we just don't get it, right? We just don't get it. But animals do. They remember their previous lifetimes, and they, my current two, my 7-year-old Cavalier King Charles Spaniel Ollie and my 5-year-old cat Karis, Russian blue cat, they had big ambitions when they came back. They were going to do all these things. So I'm looking at them the other day. I said, so when are you going to get to it, kids? And they're like, yeah, we thinking that we just really like playing most of anything. I'm like, fine, whatever you want, I'm here to support, right? That's it. Yes. And, who knows? We never really know our own soul purpose, let alone others. And so when clients come to me and they say, I don't know what my soul purpose is. Our soul purposes are all the same, people. It's learn to love yourself. And from there, what are your life circumstances? What job do you do to put food on the table and a roof over your head? How do you do that? How do you learn to get along in your families, in your neighborhoods, in your cities, in your countries? How on earth are we going to heal a planet full of divisive humans? These are things that you get to choose to work on, during your lifetime, or creative endeavors or whatever. But ultimately, you're here to learn to love yourself. And that is a really tough job if you've chosen to be a human being. For animals, not so hard. They just have an easier time remembering. And that, I think, is one reason why they have these amazing cosmic jobs that most humans have never heard of, because they've done all the grunt work in other lifetimes. And, an animal body gets rid of that ego issue that humans have, that self-involved issue. So soul purpose. We don't always end up doing in our lifetime what our souls thought they were going to do when we came into this lifetime. We just get to do the best that we can, right? And our individual soul purposes are always to love ourselves, because not loving ourselves messes us up alive and dead. And many of us have ordinary lives. My life is ordinary. I don't know another person on the planet whose life isn't also ordinary, regardless of the work they have. It's get up in the morning and get through the day and go to bed at night. And we're not all easy to love, right? Remember, love is different than liking. So you can look at someone, I can't stand that person. You don't like them, right? So, yeah, and we may be cranky people, but we love them anyway, even if we don't get along with them or don't want to have anything to do with them. Just sending the feeling of love out helps create balance and harmony on the planet. And we look at our attitude. What does our attitude mean, and how do we deal with that? So after the break, we're going to talk how soul purpose translates into grief and how we can handle the grief about continuing to live on when our beloved human and animals have died. Hang on. We'll be back after the break.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to the Practical Intuitive Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robyn, Fritz, and we're talking about the afterlife, about soul purpose and grief. So, said enough about what I think about the afterlife and what I've learned about it. And soul purpose, soul purpose if you're worried about soul purpose, and you think back to self-love and learning to love yourself, bring it back to the level of your family. Now, my family is my dog and my cat and me, and then it extends out to very few relatives and a few friends. And then beyond that, you extend into your community. But if you can bring it back to your family, like when I was thinking about what I've learned through my choice of living with animals, I've learned so many things from watching my animals. I could live and I could love and I could laugh before I had animal families, but watching the interactions of my dogs and my cats over the last 25 years or more, even longer, I learned different things about them. I learned how a dog dealt with chronic pain and illness. I learned how I didn't really believe in love, and my dad was telling me that I want you to help the stuck dead. They don't love themselves. And hello, Robyn, you don't love yourselves. And watching this little dog, Alki, who just loved me regardless of what attitude I was experiencing, that he was so full of love, that little boy. And just their antics making you laugh. And you realize that your sole purpose in your family is to come together and to support each other as we each make our way in the world. It's very simple, but it's also profound. How do you support your family? Yourself learning to love, your family learning to love. Acceptance, sending out love, sending out, you can do it. You can do it. You can just send out love and acceptance around you. And, people are going to annoy you and you can walk away from it. But learning to live and love and laugh is part of how we get through life, how we learn to grow in love. And we learn to grow in love for yourself, regardless of your mistakes, regardless of how you look that day, regardless of anything. Then you're well on the way to doing what your sole purpose is, which is to learn to love yourself and then to spread that love out in the world. And then when you die and you go to the afterlife and you choose another experience, you've been growing your soul all along. And that's what the afterlife is a place where your soul learns what it's going to do next, where it decides what it's going to do next, including going on vacation. So, and just to tell you a quick story about a man who didn't really want to talk to his daughter. She was here and she was really grieving and she wanted to talk with her dad. And he's standing there with a set of golf clubs beside him. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? He's like, oh, I don't want to talk. And I said, look, she's paying me to talk to you. My dad is here. We're taking our time. She's grieving. Help her. Help yourself. And he told her, we're in different places now. It's time for you to move on. It's time for me to move on. And thank you for talking with me today. I will always love you, but it's time for us to move on. The living go in one direction and the dead go in another. Doesn't mean you can't check in on each other now and then, but she wasn't letting go and she couldn't move on. And what did he want to do? He wanted to golf the universe. So there are all kinds of things that you can do when you're dead that you don't need a body for, and it's pretty amazing. So let's talk a little bit about grief. Grief is a tough one. I was 9 when my brother died of leukemia, and, way back then they didn't know how to prepare people. So, and I have to give my parents credit, they didn't get any time to prepare themselves. But my goodness gracious, to get that news just out of the blue, like, oh, already gone. You didn't even get a chance to say goodbye. And it turned your life upside down. I know about grief. I know about grief from losing my animal family. And talking with people lately who've lost their animals. And why do we go back and do it again? Because we love, because we have a sense of humor, because that's how we enjoy sharing our life. But grieving is a tough thing. It can make you better because it will teach you how strong you are and how much love you have for yourself and for your beloveds, human or animal. But there's some things that you can do to help with grief, and that would be before someone dies and afterwards. Okay? So before they die, if you're about to lose a family member, an animal, a human, do your research on what's going on so that you're prepared, and then make sure you have a good team around you, and make sure you take care of yourself. I know a lot of people that are dealing with end-of-life care, and I know I did a lot of it in earlier years with my parents. You have to be strong in a way that reminds you again to go back to the self-love. You love yourself no matter what. You make a mistake, you move forward. You do something right, you move forward. Stay present. Make sure you have a great team around you, but stay present. Stay in the moment. Appreciate the moment that you have. If they're going through a rough time, support them as you can. Help them through it. But also take care of yourself. Schedule time for self-care, and also schedule time to go and shut the door and scream your head off because you're angry and you're grieving and you don't want to lose them and you don't want to see them in pain and you don't want the crap. It's okay. It's okay to vent and to be angry because you're losing someone or you've lost someone. Now, if you're listening to this and you lost someone years and years ago, think back on it. And it's okay. Be angry that you lost them. Be sad. Tell them you hope they're doing okay. Ask yourself how you're doing, how you're growing, how that experience is shaping you. Are you angry and bitter? Then what can you do to alleviate the bitterness? Because bitterness is soul crushing, just in a different way than grief. Grief is crushing. There's no two ways about it. People can say, your animals will come back again, and a lot of them do, but it's not the personality. It's not the personality. And why should it be? I mean, hello, if taking a body is growing the soul, why do they need to have the same personality? They need to have different experiences. My current cavalier, Ollie, he knows who he was. He announced himself well before he was even conceived. And yet he has this completely different personality than he had before. And sometimes he just makes me laugh at the things that he chooses to do. And that's great. He's growing his soul in this new body, whatever big job he thought he was going to have when he came. If he's doing it, he hasn't told me about it. And, that's his thing. I'm creating the environment that he can be safe in, as well as the cat, all of us to be safe in. And that's what we can do. But here's what to do after they die, right? And it's a very big deal because remember energy, all right? Everything is energy, right? Everything is energy, and energy can get stuck, and grief can make energy get stuck. And when energy is stuck, then you're caught in that cycle. You're caught in that cycle of grief, and you can't get your way out of it. Instead, help energy move. So when I talk to people about clearing their spaces, which you should do after someone dies or even while they're ill and dying, what you should do is help keep energy moving. So one thing I always say is put sea salt everywhere and change it when you feel that it's done its job, because sea salt has traditionally been this, or salt of any kind, traditionally been this clearing device to help energy keep moving, and it will help you move through grief to the point where you get to where you recognize that they're not coming back, but you still had this great life together and you can both move on. I'll tell you first to throw a spectacular funeral for your deceased beloved. So there may be a public one for, people in the community, for humans. Most of us have private funerals for our animals, but I'll tell you, when my beloved Murphy, my first cavalier, when she died, I was like, oh my God, I was crushed, even though we had 6 weeks to prepare for it. That she had cancer. She refused surgery. She wanted to experience the dying process and wanted me to experience it with her. It was beautiful and heartbreaking. And when she died, I could not stop crying. But we had a funeral, and it was Alki, my surviving cavalier, and my cat and I. And people said, do you want us to come to the funeral? And I said, thank you, but no, this is just for us. And I threw the windows and doors open in my condo, and I turned on music that Murphy and I used to dance to. And yeah, she surprised me the first time she danced to this song. So incense and sea salt and loud music, and I started to dance. And the next thing I knew, here was Murphy dancing beside me, yelling, my funeral is fun. So understand that funerals are important to the living and the dead. They help you celebrate a life. They help you get closure. Celebrations are important. They recognize an event has happened, a wedding, a funeral, a birth, a death, an adoption, whatever. And they help you put a coda on it so that you can, okay, that is done. Now we move on as living and as the dead. But also know that your dead will come back for their funeral, just like Murphy came back to dance with me. They will come back for their funerals, even if they, as living humans, for example, oh no, don't have a funeral. I don't want anybody to have a funeral. I mean, like arrogant, really? Because when they're dead, they can tell you how they really did want a funeral. So plan to celebrate your dead however you do that. And you can do that without hanging on to them. So hanging on to them and not letting them go is what gets them stuck and you stuck. Remember, love. Love allows you to let go of them because they're not in that body anymore, to wish them well on their next journey, to support them, to send them into the afterlife knowing they were loved and cherished and appreciated, knowing that they loved and cherished and appreciated you. So celebrate them. And as I tell all my mediumship clients, ask them to chime in, okay? So once you know how your intuition works, whether you see things or hear things or feel energy or just know that they're present, set a time to connect with your beloved dead. Say, okay, everybody at 2:00 on Saturday afternoon, my beloved dead spiritual team and my spiritual team work out the details and come together at 2:00. So you could set pictures out, candles, incense, flowers, nothing, whatever appeals to you, but sit in it for that space and sit for whatever time you allotted, 10 or 15 minutes, and invite your beloveds to come and be with you. Okay, so they're busy just like you are, but if you set an appointment ahead of time, they'll come. And talk with them, just feel them, whatever it is. But at the end of that time, thank them for showing up. Be respectful of their time and yours. Thank them, like I said, thank them in their teams for participating. Decompress with a salt bath. And over time, you will find that you will be able to connect with your loved ones on your own. Mediums like me are good in the sense if you really need to connect and you want that objective person holding space for you. But my goal is for all of us to be able to connect with our dead on our own, as well as to learn to love ourselves. And that learning to love ourselves is all part of the grief and healing process that will happen if you allow it to. So not all of us, but most of us have lost loved ones, human and animal. We don't want them to go. We also don't want them to suffer in the bodies that they were in. And we want them to move on and have a new soul experience. And they will do that easier if you let them go and tell them how much you love them and appreciated them. It isn't easy. Grief never ends. It's gut-wrenching and it can be soul-testing. But it's also good, right? Because it reminds us that we loved and were loved in return. And boy, does the world need love, especially now, right? Remember that we had a wonderful life, even in the tough times. And yeah, we will see them again someday. And we get to the afterlife and they come to visit. So grief reminds us that love matters. So I have a book I wrote on the afterlife. I have yet to get around to marketing it. I actually was so silly, I didn't even know it was actually available because I hadn't approved page proofs, but you can find it at Amazon. It's called The Afterlife is a Party, What People and Animals Teach Us About Love, Reincarnation, and the Other Side. There's a lot of stories in there, a lot of information for you. It's available as ebook or print. And for now, I want to say goodbye to you and goodbye to 2022. And if there's one thing that you think about in terms of your soul purpose, that is that you learn to love yourself right now, regardless of what happens, regardless of the mistakes you made, regardless of how great you are, how rich you are, or how poor you are. Learn to love yourself. It is hard, but that is our soul purpose. From there, it's what we choose to do in our life and how we contribute to the welfare of our evolving planet. Take care. We'll see you in 2023.